Phone is not functioning as you planned, but hopefully you can all hear me. If you can, let me know. I would like to thank you all and our local press for joining the official kickoff of the bicentennial of the celebration of Hillcrest Children and Family Center. My name is Ken Bass. I will be your master of ceremonies this morning to give you a little bit of idea of who I am or why I might be here this morning. I am a librarian by profession, but I have a deep love of history and all the institutions that make this city what it is. Hillcrest Children and Family Center is a behavioral health, care, and social services agency. Hillcrest Center provides behavioral health treatment and prevention as well as community and family support services. Hillcrest Center is a private nonprofit organization established in 1815 by First Lady Dolly Madison that is committed to providing each client with the highest quality, cost-effective, and timely service. Hillcrest Center promotes wellness and the well-being of our service population, staff, and the general community by providing services to approximately 900 customers per month. The majority of our clients are residents of the District of Columbia. To me, what is special about Washington is its rich history. But while many of the images of important places and people that come to mind are more federal, official, we have many unassuming and modest institutions that have rich histories and deep roots in our neighborhoods. These stories are often lesser known, but extremely important. Service to children has been a constant theme in Washington. Our city was among the most progressive when it came to schools and developing a citywide playground system. The National Head Start program also had its beginnings in Washington, D.C. By celebrating the history of Hillcrest Center today, we not only get to pause and look back at 200 years of history of service to children and families, we also are reminded of how much a part of our communities Hillcrest Center has been and continues to be. As a side note, I mentioned that I'm also an advisory neighborhood commissioner. I have to tell you, I would not be able to do that job successfully without a deep understanding of the history of the institutions, of our neighborhoods, of the people that make this city what it is. By understanding why things are important, and by understanding the critical and integrated nature of institutions like Hillcrest, you understand the people, you understand their needs, and you understand how these institutions continue to keep our strong communities strong. So please join me in giving a huge applause to congratulate the Hillcrest Center for 200 years of resilient service to the District of Columbia. We will now hear from the leadership of Hillcrest Center. Ms. R. Denise Everson, Board Chair, and Mrs. Juanita Price, Chief Executive Officer.
Good morning. You do better than that. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. I feel like I'm going to Carolina Kitchen this morning. Welcome, welcome. I am a Southerner, so we always start that way. I am so pleased to see so many of you here celebrating what I consider to be the day that all of the board members and staff have waited for. We, as an organization, are celebrating 200 years, and what an accomplishment. We look good for 200, don't we? So thank you for being here. I always want to take the privilege as board president to just thank my board members, to thank my wonderful chief executive officers, and thank each of you individually for supporting Hillcrest over the years. We cannot do what we do, helping the least and the last and the lost in the District of Columbia without each of you. So I want to say thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. You know, I had talking points that Deborah so nicely prepared, and I pondered over this moment exactly what I was going to say. I had it on the phone. You know how technology is today. But I put my phone down, and I just want to say from the depths of my heart, thank you all for being here. Thank you for our partners who have just come together to help us celebrate this milestone. And what a milestone it is. 200 years when you think about it. 200 years with the same vision, the same mission, the same heart for the people, the same desire to serve for over 200 years. The vision of Dolly Madison and those other Washingtonians who helped her to bring Hillcrest to fruition. It's just amazing that we would be here at this time in this place with these people 200 years later. I know you all know some of the history, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as you go through the exhibit. But just to ponder, to think about what were they thinking 200 years ago, knowing that there were children who were orphaned by the War of 1812, knowing that there were people who had emotional needs, who had psychological needs, who had psychiatric needs, who were impoverished, knowing that those individuals needed a plan, they needed a place, they needed a purpose, they needed help. So knowing that, to lay the groundwork and the steps that just over the years, over time, through civil rights movement, through the Depression, and I know those didn't, I know that's not historically correct, but through all of the things that happened in history, for Hillcrest Center to continue to stand. So it is because of hard work and labor of many people that we will never know. We are certainly standing on the shoulders of those champions. And at this point, I am so proud. Just think how proud I could almost have a little pep when I
Hit pause.
To be the CEO at this time in the history of the organization is such a pleasure and it's such a privilege. I generally don't share a lot about myself publicly. That's not true. Ask somebody who knows. I'm like an open book. But I always say, as far as our staff is concerned, the work that we do, many of us have things to do work with. The photographers are here, and they have their cameras, and the electricians, they have tools, and mechanics have things, and bus drivers have buses to drive. But as mental health professionals, we only have ourselves. We are the therapeutic tool that really gets the job done. So to think that of all the work of all of those professionals who use themselves to move the agency, to hold hands, to pat somebody on the back, to give encouragement for all of those years is just a marvelous story. And even today, we don't want to spend all of our time. We want to honor our history, and we want to let our history bury ourselves. But we also know that there is a present and there is a future. And presently, even today as I speak, some of our staff are in the schools visiting with teachers and with clients. Some of our staff are visiting the hospitals. Somebody has somebody taking them to the doctor. Somewhere somebody is getting medication dispensed. Somebody's blood pressure is getting checked. Somebody's getting encouraged. A mom's tears are being wiped. A dad's is being encouraged. A child is being hugged. So we have so much to do yet, even 200 years later. There's so much work for us to do. And I just encourage us that as we look upon the bicentennial, this is just a launch. You'll be getting a lot of letters and emails because we did not plan just one event. I want you to know that. But we're going to celebrate this entire year of all of the work, of all of the love, of all of the just everything that has gone into making Hillcrest what it is today. And more so than just Hillcrest, just the work and the people who have benefited from the work that has been done that started over 200 years ago. So again, I thank you, partners. I especially thank my lovely, wonderful, to be brilliant and beautiful, all at the same time. Our lovely President, R. Denise Everson, and our other board members that are here. It is just a beautiful time in the history of the organization, and certainly something that I feel so very proud, and I know I share that pride with our other staff that are here. One last thing before I take my seat. I don't talk long. That's not true either. But one of the things that I do want to share with you is that this has been my life's work. I have worked in mental health. I've worked with children and families, my entire life. And I know that it is what I was called to do. Some years ago, I had the occasion to live with my mom and my stepdad. At some point in their lives, they had a lot of life, and at some point in their life, they were both ministers. And there was a state hospital in our area, and the state hospital was what we call deinstitutionalizing. People were moving out to the community. And so they brought Martha, Bertha, and Timberly to live with us. And these were mentally ill people, and at that time, with the kind of medication that was used, they were very, they shook a lot. They had a lot of disease was very just prevalent, on them. And I just didn't like those people living in our house. And I resented them. I resented Bertha, Margaret, and Timberly so badly. I was like in the 7th grade. I'm like, why are these people here? I'm embarrassed. But I did not know that I was being prepared at that time to develop a heart for people with psychological problems. I was being groomed at that time to develop the spirit of compassion. And so from a 7th grader, I have taken that. And to bring all of that around to the work that I do is just such a blessing. And then to be connected with Dolly Madison. That just trips me out. To have that connection. And her concern about orphans, and some of you I've shared that I had time, I spent time. I have a foster mom. There were, maybe 8-10 years of my life that I spent growing up in foster care. And so just to have all of that come around today, to this day, January the 15th, 2015. It is just a wonderful cycle of life. So again, I thank you all for being here. I thank Deborah for her great organizational skills, my wonderful board and staff, and such a pleasure to have met today. So you can leave us alone.
And I share that pleasure and respect. Thank you. We will now, Hillcrest Children and Family Center is also proud to have bicentennial partners. We will now have greetings from Mr. Robert N. Holm, Executive Director of the President Woodrow Wilson House.
And let me just say congratulations to Hillcrest Center on its bicentennial. How often do you get to congratulate an institution on 200 years of existence? I want to take a moment to acknowledge the participation of the Woodrow Wilson House in this bicentennial. We're proud and honored to be a partner. And maybe it's incumbent upon me to specifically thank two of my staff, our curator, Stephanie Doherty, and an intern, Miranda Johnson, who are responsible for setting up the displays that you'll see in the other room. And I invite you to take a moment and look at the historical artifacts that are there, some from Montpelier, some from the Hillcrest Center collections of artifacts that they have in their own archives. But also acknowledge when you do that those were put in place by our staff and tenderly and carefully organized, and we particularly appreciate that. So let me invite applause for them. I'm the director of the President Woodrow Wilson House, and that's a historic home owned by the National Trust for Historic Preservation near DuPont Circle. And as I'm reflecting on the 200 years history of the Hillcrest Center, I'm forced to think about the 100-year history of the Woodrow Wilson House. The house was completed in 1916, and President and Mrs. Wilson moved into it actually the day they left the White House in 1921. So President Wilson was president 100 years ago. So I spend much of my time living in the time 100 years ago. And we have the opportunity here in the Octagon, every day as you work with the Hillcrest Center, and every day as we work at the Woodrow Wilson House, to think about what history means. History offers us an opportunity, really a challenge, to put our minds and our hearts back into where people were 100 or 200 years ago. And it was a very different place. And it's not really an easy thing to do. You know, we think, well, what was it like to be back 200 years ago? It's almost impossible to imagine. When you think about this, Dolly Madison and a group of women, all women, organized the city of Washington, Washington City, Asylum for Orphans, 200 years ago. Okay? This is an era in which women were still more than 100 years from having the right to vote in this country. Okay? This is an era in which women had almost no authority within society. You know, they couldn't testify in court. They couldn't own property. Almost nothing they could do was without the consent or almost ownership of their father or their husbands. And yet these women thought this issue was so important that they needed to take it on. And it's really quite remarkable that an all-woman board of directors and an all-woman management staff, imagine the people of that era. You can imagine the men thinking, women are running this? I mean, that was amazing. And yet today, it's almost something we don't even know because it's a common occurrence. But it began somewhere. It started. There was a time when Dolly Madison and a group of remarkable women founded this institution. And that's something for us to be proud of again today. So history teaches us about change, but it also teaches us about continuity. I think I look at the history of Hillcrest and I see an impulse among Americans to care for the disadvantaged among us. And isn't it amazing that that impulse was here really at the birth of our country? I mean, James Madison was our fourth president. He just didn't rise up out of the sand, you know, and become the fourth president. He grew up during our revolutionary period. He was there at the founding of our country. And so the impulse to care for those among us with disadvantages was something that really was foundational to the nature of America. And so when we look around today and we wonder, you know, what is the thing that should lead us to support the Hillcrest Center? It's our own history. It's our nature as Americans to support the least among us. And the nature of that has evolved. You know, as you were talking about the mental health aspects of Hillcrest, I thought I would share with you that I've learned a lot of trivia about President Wilson. I have two daughters in their 20s, and about now they'd be elbowing me, Dad, get off, you've told too much about this. But one thing I think is remarkable in this context is that President Wilson and Sigmund Freud were born in the same year. Now think about how little we understood about the unconscious. I'm not saying Freudian analysis and all that, that's not the current stage of thought about mental health. But he was the one who said, hey, there's a whole unconscious here that people truly were unaware of before that time. And yet he and President Wilson were contemporaries. So when President Wilson was in college, there were no classes in psychology. It wasn't even an area of study. And think of what we know. I was touched when Juanita was talking about, the drugs that people took in her youth, which is just a couple of decades ago. But how that has changed. How that has changed even in that short time. Think about how much the care of, there were people with mental health issues 200 years ago, and people trying to care for them who didn't have a clue as to what to do or how to do it. And so through this entire trajectory of history, the Hillcrest Center has been involved, and it deserves our support. And I want to congratulate them on their bicentennial, but I'd also like to get a round of applause for tomorrow, which is the beginning of their third century.
We will next hear from Mr. John South, Executive Director of Historical Society of Washington, D.C. Oh, okay. Well, unfortunately, he was not able to be here today, so we'll move on, excuse me, to Ms. Michelle Gillian, Archives Director, National First Ladies Library.
Good morning. I can't tell you how proud I am to be here. The National First Ladies Library is located in Canton, Ohio, and but we are all about First Ladies, and I can't think of a more appropriate time to be here in Washington, D.C. with Dolly Madison. Our mission is to serve the community and the public about the causes and what the contributions of First Ladies are here in our country. And Dolly Madison doing what she did is what we're all about. And so we couldn't be more proud and happy to be here. I want to thank the Hillcrest board and for including us. It's just been so much fun and a joy. We're so proud, and personally, as a mother with a child with disabilities, I know how important it is, the work that you do. So I'm personally affected by and have received these kinds of services, and I know how important they are to everyone. So thank you so much for including us. You are going to get a real treat here in a little bit. Our Dolly Madison will be speaking to you soon. And so thank you again. We are so impressed and happy and joyful that you are 200 years strong. And thank you very much. I really enjoyed being here.
We will next hear from Ms. Anna Goltz, Assistant Director of Annual Giving at James Madison's Montpelier.
Thank you all so much. And Montpelier is the lifelong home of James Madison, located in Orange, Virginia. We're about 30 miles northwest of Charlottesville, so just under 2 hours from here. Today we are a museum and also a National Trust site, and we are dedicated to sharing the legacies of both James and Dolly Madison with the nation and the world, and we're very pleased to be here today as well. Thank you. James Madison's legacy is something we engage with every time we celebrate democratic self-government. He is, of course, known as the father of the Constitution and the architect of the Bill of Rights. And so, to Ken's point, it is that focus in D.C. that's very federal at large, and not so locally focused. But Dolly's legacies are really equally pervasive. That term, First Lady, was uniquely coined to describe Dolly's role, and a role that she created within the White House. And you truly were America's first power couple. Her savvy understanding of social graces and political maneuvering founded the culture of this capital city, a place she dearly loved. If Montpelier was James Madison's heart, D.C. was Dolly's heart. Today, the Hillcrest Children and Family Center carries forward that same important work and legacy, and we at Montpelier are also grateful for the ongoing importance that they bring to the community in sharing Dolly's lasting legacy. Thank you for your 200 years of service to the D.C. municipal community. I encourage you all to plan a day trip to visit us at Montpelier. As I said, just a quick 2-hour drive, and we would love to share with you Dolly's famous hospitality.
And next we will hear from Teresa Martinez, Curator of the Octagon Museum.
Well, thank you all very much for being here, and I would like to extend a welcome to all of you to the Octagon. The Octagon is one of the oldest buildings here in Washington, D.C. The house was completed in 1801. And our connection, why you all are here for this event, is we actually served as the White House for 6 months. From September of 1814 until March of 1850, James and Dolly Madison lived here in the Octagon and continued the business of government and Washington, D.C. social life after the British burned most of the federal buildings, including the White House, here in Washington in August of 1814. So we did serve as the White House for 6 months. Dolly Madison, though she wasn't incredibly fond of the Octagon, we know from some of her accounts, the rooms weren't quite large enough for her entertaining. Probably extra crowded at Dolly's Squeezes here. But we do have a long-standing connection to a lot of D.C. history, and in many ways the Octagon has, while also being just over 200 years old, we have a connection to basically the entirety of Washington, D.C. history. I mean, When this house was built, if you take a look at the painting on the back wall, that's what Washington, D.C. looked like. There wasn't a whole lot here in 1800, 1801. You can see the White House from the back of this house, and you can see the Potomac from the front door. So a little bit different from how it is today. You can really see the history of Washington, D.C. through this house. The house was built for and occupied by the Taylor family, a prominent family from Virginia. The Taylors lived here until 1855. After that point, the house went through a number of different uses. We were federal offices at one point in the 1860s, like almost every other building here in D.C. The house eventually became tenement apartments in the 1880s. As Washington, D.C., especially the neighborhood of Foggy Bottom, became an increasingly industrial city, grand old houses like the Octagon became housing for the factory workers who were working in factories that lined the Potomac down where the Watergate and the Kennedy Center are today. And then in 1898, the American Institute of Architects was looking for a new national headquarters, and they settled on this building. We were AIA's headquarters from 1898 until about 1970. They built the large building that kind of encircles us behind us. So Washington, D.C., so the Octagon is intimately connected to many different aspects of Washington, D.C. history, as is Hillcrest. Hillcrest has played an incredibly important role in the work that goes on behind the scenes in many cases in this city, but the incredibly important work that is going on helping all of the residents of this city, not just the politicians and the big names, helping all of the residents achieve the best life they can. So we are incredibly grateful to be able to host all of you and Hillcrest here for your bicentennial kickoff. And again, thank you all very much for coming. If you have some time after you take a look at the exhibits here on the first floor, you're welcome to head upstairs. There's some more exhibits up there, as well as the room that President Madison used as his office, basically the precursor to the Oval Office, a circular office, and you can see where President Madison signed the Treaty of Ghent in February of 1815, the treaty that ended the War of 1812, and is widely considered one of the longest-standing unbroken international treaties in the world. Ushered in, again, 200 years, that seems to be the theme today, 200 years of peace and goodwill between the U.S. and Great Britain. So again, thank you all very much, and we hope you enjoy your time here at the Octagon.
Hillcrest Center would like to take this final moment to recognize the legacy of its founder, First Lady Dolly Madison. On behalf of the National First Ladies Library, please welcome Miss Lucinda Fraley as Dolly Madison.
Well, I do love them all, so this is Oh, I thank you for coming today, and I am most happy to be here. I did hear from out in the hallway that I was not exactly delighted to be here in 1814, and that is true. I'm afraid that I was, we'll talk about that later. We don't want you to say it, because I really am here today to welcome everybody to the bicentennial celebrations from here of the founding of the Washington City Female Orphan Asylum, now known as Hillcrest Center.
Wow.
It does my heart so good. The word asylum is a good word. You did name it for that for a reason. I did not realize it in 1814. This house is kind of an asylum, excuse me, for my brilliant little medicine and I, to begin the work of bringing this city back to the capital as the capital city. I was the leader of everything fashionable, and that meant more to me than just clothing and parties, my drawing rooms. It meant helping people in the city. So asylum, this house did allow that. I appreciate that more now than I did then. But my ladies and I did gather together, and we had the help and support of their husbands. One of the husbands was a woman that knew very well. I keep looking at you. I assume you are part of the board. Absolutely. Absolutely. And this side too. You know, our staff and things her husband was a great leader in the city, and he wanted to keep the Capitol here just as we did. And he built a place right on the side of what is now known as the Supreme Court. It was called the Brick Capitol. And that's where that body of men we know as Congress, who moved so slowly. It took them 4.5 months in that building to decide to keep the Capitol here in the city, which we wanted desperately. But we met there, my ladies and I. It is good to be the wife of the president. And Margaret Bayard Smith, she was a very good friend of mine. She was an author too in her own right, but her husband was the founder of the Washington, they called it the National Intelligence at that time. And we met there on October the 10th, does that date sound familiar to you? 1815. And this was the purpose. And I think I'm going to leave those sparkly. Thank you. I don't have my spectacles with me. These are so sparkly. Thank you, Miss Deborah. She loaned them to me. I like them, actually. This is my time. But this is what did happen October 10th, 1815. That announcement in the morning in the Intelligencer, this was in it. It said, "The ladies of the county of Washington and neighborhood are requested to meet in the Hall of Representatives, the great Capitol, this day at 11 a.m. for the purpose of joining an association and providing asylum for the destitute orphans." And that was it. As Miss Deborah said, she's going to do this to me if I don't take up that, if I go more than a few minutes. I don't know what this means. Well, I was elected the directress, and I did. I don't know if anyone was told, but I did donate $20 and a cow. It was a lot of money back then, and the cow was one point. We couldn't just go to the market. There were none to buy milk for the children that we were expecting. So that was important. But more importantly, I was a leader in this town. I was known as Queen Dolly. And I used that to advantage in this case. Every place I would go to do what I called my delicious work, and my ladies would come with me, we would attract other ladies. We were doing sewing for the children, and we would make clothes for them or repair clothes or mend. And that attracted a lot of ladies and a lot more support for the Washington Children's Asylum, as well as money. Now, Margaret Bayard Smith, she did something else. I told you she was an author. She wrote books, and she auctioned her book off to raise money in this town and across the nation. It was called, What is Gentility? And it sold very well. And of course, your own, a lady you know very well from history, Marsha, my good friend Marsha, she did do the day-to-day running. And I will end now, although I would like to talk with you more later. It was called Female for a reason. I cannot get into all of it now, but let's just say that at that time, the female people, female population all across America, they had no rights. And this city, before the war, was prevalent with poverty, especially with women. If they did not have a husband or males in their family who would protect them, you can imagine what happened in the streets. Besides the little boys and little girls here, we saw women all over, and we wanted to make sure the females were welcome. And that's what we did. The capital city, I hope that you appreciate it today, because we knew that there was no capital like it in the world. Its only business is politics, and everything grew bigger and better because of that, including the Washington City Female Orphans Asylum into Hillcrest. You grew with it, and I thank you. I thank you. And I congratulate you.
Hillcrest Center would like to take this final moment to recognize the legacy of its founder. Oh, sorry, I got it before myself. This officially ends the press portion of the event. Please continue to enjoy the exhibit in the adjoining room, and Ms. Juanita Price will give closing remarks.
Well, that was just a little emotional for me. That was wonderful, just to think, where we are, everything is by design. And I'm just so thankful for this day. And so happy again that the board had the foresight to say we are going to pause in the daily operations to give some due to our bicentennial. So I'm so happy for that. And we did not introduce our board members, but I would like for them to stand. Michael Benjamin is our treasurer. Randy Atchison is our chairperson of our bicentennial committee and communications committee. And Keisha Robinson is the secretary of the board. And of course, you've met the Miss Lovely Ardennis Everson. And, Dr. Childs, please come in. Dr. Childs is also a member of our board and a member of the bicentennial committee. So I do want to thank you all for your leadership and for your support and for your vision as you are carrying on with the likes of Dolly Madison and Miss Van Ness and all of the other individuals. And certainly, just from the few minutes that we've shared, I see my role as even more important. And I'm sure that you see an even more profound reason to continue to support this very fine organization, more worthy than any of the work that we could ever do. I do want to take a minute of personal privilege, however, to say that you'll see that our staff are wearing purple ribbons today. And one person who would be here, in fact, last Wednesday, she planned with Deborah and the staff as to all of the logistics and how everything would go. Her name is Elise Littlejohn, and she was my executive assistant. Well, we got very sad news on Saturday that Ms. Littlejohn had passed. And so we are a very grieving organization right now. And one of the things we wanted to do in her honor and in missing her, knowing that she would be here today, is to wear the purple ribbon. So if we could just take just a couple seconds just to pause in the memory, because if you knew Ms. Littlejohn, you would know that her personality and her presence really typified everything that Hillcrest stands for. So let's just take, please, just one moment of silence in honor of the legacy that she left to us. Amen. Amen. So again, thank you. I don't know if I should say anything else. Deborah, if I missed anything. Oh, I do have one other thing to say. This is very handsome man that's peering in through the door, and I would like to get your number. I would like to get your number. I need you to step in your room.
He had my number for 44 years.
Oh, that is right. And I do want to acknowledge my husband of 43 years as the, what did he say, as the first husband of Hillcrest. Thank you for your support. And literally, I would not have been here today had it not been for him. Because I was riding around in circles, trying to get here. But thank you so much. And again, thank you, staff, for your work and all that you do. And I love you. I love you very much. Thank you so much for everything. Is that okay? Back to you now?
That's beautiful. And I believe that concludes the press event. The exhibition is open. I believe there are refreshments. And now we get to meet each other.
Thank you.